Well, hi, everybody. Glad to see you tonight. I'm going to apologize up front. I've got this kind of weird laryngitis thing going on, so my voice is okay now, but if I start sounding like a frog here in a little bit, I apologize. Hopefully I'll make it through without all that. So welcome. I'm glad to see everybody. Hopefully you guys have had a good week, and we're all dealing with this craziness that is 2020, and we still don't know who our president is, and all that good stuff. So like I said, just hope everybody's hanging in there okay. So tonight, basically, I just want to do 3 things with you. We're going to look at Module 2 and talk about the assignments, so I can answer any questions and stuff like that you guys have. Then we're going to get into understanding by design, and we'll talk more about that specifically. And then finally, I'm going to leave hopefully some time here at the end where you guys can ask any questions or anything like that that we need to. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and so you can see week 2, module 2. So like always, you see what our objectives and all that are for this week. Then you're going to have an assignment this week that is a reflective essay. So in this, you're going to respond to 3 questions, and you're going to give me a 1 to 3 paragraph essay to answer these questions. These questions are based off of your article readings from both and videos, PowerPoints, etc. from last week as well as this week. Like I said, you're going to answer these questions. Okay, so it talks about the first one about instructional delivery models. So I just want you to pick one model and tell me why you think why you chose that and why you think it is the most effective. Then the second question talks about curriculum alignment and unpacking standards, which hopefully will make much more sense to you here in just a few minutes. And then finally, how will you determine the best instructional design model that's best for your students? So the first one is really about choosing one, why do you think it's effective? The second question is about, how do you use curriculum alignment and unpacking standards to design effective instruction? And then what would be the best instructional design model that is best for your students? And like I said, that'll hopefully make a whole lot more sense after we walk through our presentation tonight. Okay? You're also going to be looking at and starting your unpacking standards. That's case study number 1. This is not due until November the 15th. And I don't know why these weird dates are on there. That's crazy. But anyway, this is, just a second, let me pull this up. I'm going to stop sharing and pull this up over here. Let's see. There it is. Okay, so this is the template that you're going to use to unpack a standard, and I'll walk you through that here in just a minute if it'll let me. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go through and choose a standard, or standards I should say, from either the grade level you teach, or you want to do another one, whatever. It can be from any state, any system, etc. It does not matter. But what we're going to do is you're going to list the standard, then you're going to break it down, and you're going to break it down by nouns and by verbs. Okay, so you're going to first go through and look at your standard and underline the nouns in the standard, and then you're going to highlight the verbs. Then you're going to come back over here and you're going to list the nouns, and then you're going to list the verbs. Then based on your sort of core compacting of this standard, the nouns and the verbs, you're going to decide where this falls on Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, I think most of you probably are, but if you're not, just do a Google search on Bloom's taxonomy, and it'll tell you exactly what kind of words and questions are used for knowledge questions all the way through evaluation questions. Okay, so you're just going to pick one standard, and like I said, list the nouns, list the verbs, then you tell me, which one it falls under. So for example, if I had the standard, let's see, students will be able to add two-digit numbers with, yeah, let's just say just students will be able to add two-digit numbers without any regrouping or anything like that. So it's just pretty simple. Students will be able to add two-digit numbers. So what are my nouns? Students, numbers, right? Students will be able to add. What am I asking them to do? I'm asking them to add. So that's going to fall under, because I know that when I'm asking students to just do something simple like that, that's generally going to be a knowledge question, okay? So all I would do here is I would put a check mark, an X, or something like that. I know there's a bunch of blanks on here. I used to make students do a bunch of standards, so I'm not going to make you do that. It's just one standard, nouns, verbs, and then you just check the box which applies. Then you're going to write learning objectives that are aligned to this standard. So when we talk more here in a minute about unpacking standards, this will make more sense. But when you unpack a standard, punctuation matters. So for example, anywhere you see a comma, so students will be able to add two-digit numbers, comma, subtract two-digit numbers, comma, and subtract two-digit numbers with regrouping. Those are three separate concepts, okay? It's not just one, it's three. So if I chose that as my standard, I should have three learning objectives because there's three different concepts being taught. And learning objectives are generally written something like this. Students will be able to add two-digit numbers with 100% accuracy. Okay. Then my next one might be students will be able to subtract numbers without regrouping with 100% accuracy. Then my third objective would be students will be able to subtract numbers with regrouping with 100% accuracy. Okay, kind of makes sense? Then the evidence of student mastery is how are you going to know if they know it? So what is it that you're going to do to assess their understanding? It could be an exit ticket. It could be a quiz. It could be, if you're in the beginning learning stages of these kind of concepts, you might be using manipulatives. So the students are going to demonstrate it with math blocks or, whatever. But just tell me how you're going to know if they've learned it or not, okay? And it could be a homework assignment. It could be a class assignment. There's a million ways you can figure out if students know it or not. So you only have to do one standard. You're going to just tell me where it falls. Then you're going to answer these two questions, okay? Then let's look at the template. Hang on, let me open this up. Have it all here so you guys can still see it. Can you see this one okay? So how do you use this template? So you're going to choose a standard you want to unpack, just like we said in the first one. You're going to underline the verbs, circle the nouns. It's just, whichever out here. Then you're going to put the standard. So this is the standard, the way it's actually written, okay? This is the nouns. These are the verbs. What is the big idea? A lot of times I've seen teachers write actual standards from the state or the national curriculum as objectives for students. And I'm like, are you seriously going to try to tell your first graders that they're going to, do this? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. So what you're going to do instead is you're going to translate that standard into student-friendly language. Then you're going to develop what's called an essential question. Now, essential questions were created by Heidi Hayes-Jacobs. You should be watching one of her videos this week.
Miss Johnson, I don't think we can see your screen.
Oh, you can't? I'm sorry. Thank you. Let me try that again. Hang on. Here it is. Okay, let me try this one more time. Share screen. Where's it? Sorry, my computer is like crazy right now. There it is. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ainsley. Can y'all see it now? Okay, thank you. All right, so anyway, you're going to choose a standard. This is very much like the other template, just two different forms. You're going to choose your standard. You're going to tell me what the nouns are and the verbs are. You're going to rewrite that standard in student-friendly language. Then, like I was saying, Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, you have a video from her. She's the one who came up with the idea of an essential question. So from that standard, you're going to try to come up with a question that you want students to be able to answer by the end of the class period. So for example, if we go back to my standard, students will be able to add 2-digit numbers. My essential question would be, how do you add 24 plus 24? That's my essential question, because I want my students to be able to tell me how they would do that by the end. So it doesn't have to be anything, like I said, guys, don't make this complicated. This is that stuff that you do in a classroom, you're just putting it into writing. And so how are you, or would you address this in your grade level? What are you already doing? What is maybe another strategy that you want to try? So 2 different questions, basically 2 different answers like here. Okay. Make sense? Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing and I'll go to the last one here. And let's see if it's going to open with Adobe, please. There we go, and let me share again. Okay, there we go. All right, so again, I know that I'm having you do redundant work, and you can use the same standard for all of these, that's fine. But I want you to get used to these different templates, because different, what am I trying to say? Different instructional models will use different variations of unpacking standards, templates, or worksheets, or whatever. So I just want you to kind of play around with and understand how each one of these looks. Now this is specifically from Understanding by Design, which was developed by Wiggins and McTighe. This is their actual template. Like I said, you can use the same standard 3 times. That is fine. You know, if you're going to write objectives, you can use the 3 objectives, the same 3 objectives, or 2, or however many you have. But I want you to get used to these different templates and the different questions, because no 2 school districts use the same instructional delivery models. You know, some are big into Understanding by Design. Some really like Fenwick English's model. Some really like the way Heidi Hayes Jacobs does it. There's a million different ones out there. And I've even been in a district where different schools that I was supervising use different design models. But so like I said, this is just to get an understanding. I'm not expecting you to master this yet. So in this particular template, what is your established goal? That's going to be your standard. Now, then you're going to answer these questions. So how will students be able to independently use their learning? Okay. So if my standard was students will be able to add 2-digit numbers with 100% accuracy, how are they going to transfer that learning? So what I want them ideally to be able to do is within a word problem context, students will be able to, and then I'm going to just break it down. They'll be able to first identify that this requires, sorry, my dog is laying on my keyboard and making it beep. Sorry about that. So anyway, so the first thing students are going to have to do is to be able to read and understand the word problem. Then I want them to go through and identify the mathematical operation that they need to use. In this case, it's addition. Then they're going to be able to identify the 2 numbers that need to be added together. They're going to perform the mathematical calculation, and then they're going to come up with the final answer. Okay? So that's what transfer of learning looks like. What do I need them to understand to be able to do that? Well, I need them to understand the mathematical operation of addition. I need them to understand how to add together 2-digit numbers to come up with a sum. And I need them to be able to read and problem solve the word problem so that they can successfully answer it mathematically. Now, back to the essential question, just like we had before with Heidi Hayes Jacobs. So what is your essential question? How do you add 2-digit numbers? Pretty simple. Now, students will know, so by the end of my lesson, they'll know how to add 2-digit numbers. And within the context of a word problem, they're going to be skilled at 2-digit addition without regrouping. Okay? Then in stage 2, how am I going to evaluate it? So this can be pretty generic right here. So I may use an exit ticket. So I write exit ticket. What's their performance task? On their exit ticket, I'm going to give them 3 2-digit addition problems that I want them to solve. My other evidence, well, if I use an exit ticket here, I'm going to review those exit ticket results. And my evidence here is going to be how many students mastered the concept on their exit ticket. So if I have 20 kids in my class and only 2 of them mastered the content, that tells me immediately I've got to reteach this tomorrow. If all of my students mastered it, then check that one off and I'm ready to move on. If I have, a few students who didn't master it, then I know I need to set up some sort of in-class remediation right then, the next day to get those kids back on track. Okay. So summary of events. Basically, this is kind of a mini lesson plan here. So I'm going to say that, basically it really comes from right here. So that students will be able to, here's what I'm going to type in. Okay? Kind of make sense? You're just going to take that standard and keep breaking it down, break it down, break it down. Then you're going to tell me right here how you're going to teach it to your students in a short summary. Okay? It can be bullet points, it can be a paragraph, it can be steps. Like I said, I'm not too concerned about the format here as much as I am you understanding. Okay, clear as mud? Questions? Hey, y'all are making this too easy on me tonight. Okay, have any of you guys ever done templates like this with your schools? I see Debbie shaking her head. Yeah, we all did this all the time in my schools in Dallas, but I've learned since coming to Louisiana that they don't use this stuff, which just kind of mind-boggling to me. It's not new stuff. It's been around 10 plus years. Pretty standard in a lot of school districts. But anyway, we'll see. Okay, so those are your 2 assignments. Your case study and doing all those templates, it's not actually due till November the 15th. Oh, good. I'm glad Jordan had PD on this. Yay, somebody's doing this. Okay, so yeah, Kaylin says they don't use it at her school, but you learned it in undergrad. Yeah, like I said, I'm really kind of surprised that it's not being used more often because it's an excellent tool to really understand standards and get to the meat of what needs to be taught. So those are the only 2 things for this week, but your case study isn't done until then. And you have those 3 templates. You can use the same standard every time. You can, anything that's cross-referenced. So, like in one template, it talks about the essential question. The last template I just went through with you asked about essential questions. So you can use it 2 times there. Kind of make sense? Okay. All right. Well, without further ado then, I'm going to, let me pull up our presentation for tonight. And I will share that with you guys as well. Here, come on, there it goes. Okay, so give me a thumbs up. Are you seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to talk about leadership for learning. And what that means is a lot of people don't realize that there is a very strong interconnectedness between instruction, assessment, and curriculum. So if you think about a 3-legged table, and each one of those legs of the table, one leg is instruction, one is assessment, and one is curriculum. If you were to remove one of those legs from your 3-legged table, that table is going to fall. Far too often, schools plan instruction based on the curriculum without also addressing and understanding assessment. And then they wonder why their assessment results aren't very good. Or conversely, they look just at the assessment and just at the curriculum, but they don't pay attention to the instruction. So in my head, this has always looked like a little triangle, where at one tip you have curriculum, another point you have instruction, and the third point you have assessment. The 3 of them I call the CIA triad. They have to be done simultaneously. So when you're looking at curriculum, you better also be looking at assessment. And when you're looking at curriculum and you're looking at assessment, you better use those tools to plan your instruction. Because if you don't, you will get a misalignment between the three of them. And when there is misalignment, that's when we have problems in student achievement. Now, sometimes we get lucky and we can have all kinds of misalignment and still do well, but that's generally going to be the product of whether or not the student is coming from a more affluent background or something like that, and not from an impoverished background. Because we know poverty is a huge driver of student achievement. But when we use these tools, we can ensure quality instruction for all students. So let's take a look at what that really looks like. Okay? So, I want you to look around. This is really incredibly small. I'm not even sure I can read it. So I want you to look around, and I want you to listen to this swarm of students who are, moving into the classroom and the doors close. And what's going to happen when those doors close? Okay? Because far too often, Miss Smith will go in her room with her 20 third graders, close the door, and do her instruction. And next door, Miss Jones is going to go in with her 20 third graders, close the door, and do instruction. There is absolutely no guarantee that the instruction is the same. There's not even the guarantee that they're both teaching the same concept. There's no guarantee that either one of them are teaching from the curriculum or using the standards, because teachers far too often work in isolation. And while that may have worked 1,000 years ago when I was in school, it doesn't work anymore, guys, because the standards are much more in number. They're also much more complex, and we expect more of students in earlier grades than we ever have in the past. So we have to understand that there's got to be some continuity of instruction, assessment, and curriculum across all third grade classrooms in our particular building. Okay? So as a leader, whether you're a teacher leader, principal, assistant principal, whatever, how often should you go in those classrooms? How do you know what's going on in there? How do we ensure that there is equitable instruction across classrooms and teachers? Well, you don't know, and you can't expect what you don't inspect. So, as one person, we have to make sure that we are taking care of these issues and addressing them. So let's talk a little bit about the how. Okay, so when we talk about instruction, we're going to start there tonight. We have to make sure that our students get the best first instruction they can get. So the first time you introduce a concept, we have to make sure that that instruction is aligned to the curriculum as well as to the assessment. And we do the best job we can delivering that instruction to our students. So we as teachers and leaders have to figure out, what does good instruction look like? What does it look like in practice? What does it look like when I walk into a classroom? So what are the opportunities to make that happen? But also, what are the barriers that we're going to address? So what are the hallmarks of effective schools and classrooms? I'm not going to read this to you guys. You can absolutely read it. But to give you a synopsis, effective instruction looks like pretty simple. When I went into a classroom as a principal, an assistant superintendent, team leader, department chair, all those different roles I did, there were 3 questions I always asked. And I didn't ask the teacher because I didn't care what the teacher was doing. What I cared about was, what are the students doing? So I would ask the students, number 1, what are you learning? Number 2, why are you learning this? And number 3, how do you know if you've learned it? And in my random sampling of students, if they could answer those 3 questions, that teacher was doing a good job, and I didn't have to worry about all these other issues. If the students could not answer those 3 questions, and I even asked this of pre-K and kinder students, they can answer it too. If the students can't answer that, that tells me there's misalignment. There's a problem either in the way the teacher used and interpreted the curriculum, or the curriculum or the instruction was not aligned to the assessment, or the instruction was not aligned to curriculum assessment and or it was ineffective. So when you go in a classroom, it's not about what the teacher is doing. Because I will tell you, you know, I had some teachers who could put on the absolute best dog and pony show you've ever seen in your life. And they could pull it out the minute an administrator walked in that room. But they didn't get the results. And those students weren't necessarily getting the best instruction. So I'm not interested in dog and pony shows. If I wanted that, I would go watch a bunch of YouTube videos. That's not what it's about. It's about the students. And when I saw engaged students who could understand what they were learning, why they were learning it, and how they would know if they learned it or not, that was the crux of good first instruction. Okay? So it's pretty simple. We got to the point where our teachers were asking the students that throughout the lesson. You know, and they would use things like whiteboards or cups or, a lot of people thought, oh my gosh, y'all aren't going to do that at high school even. We did. And one of my most effective teachers, who was actually my science department chair and my chemistry teacher, he would have on everybody's desk 3 cups, a yellow one, a green one, and a red one. And at any given time, if the students were with him and understanding what they were doing, they were feeling okay about it, they would have their green cup up. If they were getting a little bit murky, they would just put up their yellow cup. If he completely lost them, they'd put up their red cup. That was a very easy, quick visual symbol to him. Okay, I got to stop and either pull this back and reteach, or you know what, they're really getting this, I'm excited, I can keep moving. Very effective, and believe it or not, even the jaded high school kids thought this was cool and did it. You can use whiteboards, you can do simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Like I said, there's a million different ways to gauge how your students are doing it. But those 3 questions are very effective, pivotal, and very powerful in assessing where our students are. So let's talk now about expectations. Okay? So I've given you a couple of standards here. And I'm sorry, they're incredibly small, so I do apologize. But I gave you, these are actually standards for educators. Okay, so I'm pulling from the ELCC standards. The first one is 1.0. A building level education teacher applies knowledge that promotes the success of every student by collaboratively facilitating the development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship of a shared school vision of learning. I'm not going to go on any further. So just looking at that part of what I just read to you, show me with a show of fingers, how many concepts are in there just so far? Remember, commas matter. It's okay. I'm the only one that can see your hands. So I see some of you kind of going, 4, 3, 2, 5, 10. Okay. I'm seeing mostly 4s and 5s. You're both right. Some people would say there's 5 because if you use the first one, applies knowledge, that could be 1. And then you have that they need to facilitate the development, articulate implementation, stewardship, and collaboration, sorry. So like I said, there's not always a hard and fast answer. My point in sharing this with you is that this is a very long standard that has multiple pieces. There is no way that I, as your professor, can teach you all of this standard in a single meeting. Kind of makes sense? See how it breaks apart? Let's look at the second one. Candidates understand and collaboratively develop, articulate, implement, and steward a shared vision of learning for a school. That is actually what is under the one you just read. So you have the standard 1.0, then you have substandards. So what they've done is they've broken these down into more discrete pieces. So under the one under the like looks like the blue metal thing, standard 1.1, how many concepts do you see here? Yeah, I'm seeing again the 4 or 5. Either one's correct. Now I will tell you, because I have written curriculum for districts, I would not write it this way. I would simply say, because I hate the word understand, because none of us can really measure understanding, you know? So what I would have said was candidates can collaboratively develop, articulate, implement, and steward a shared vision of learning for a school. I wouldn't say anything about understanding because I can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you don't need it in my book. Okay, but see how how these kind of break down? So they took, if you look into the yellow book, they've taken that big, huge standard 1.0, and they've helped to break it down a little bit more for you into substandards. You have 1.1, 1.3, and 1.4. But even within those broken apart or unpacked pieces of the original standard, you'll notice there's still multiple concepts within the substandard. So those are going to require even more unpacking. Okay? Kind of making sense a little bit what we're talking about and how you do this? Okay, go on. Okay, so this is 2.0, and again, a very long standard. So a building level educator leader applies knowledge that promotes the success of every student by sustaining a school culture and instructional program conducive to student learning through collaboration, trust, and personalized learning environment with high expectations for students. That's a mouthful. So they've broken down the standard into those same sub-elements. So let's focus this time just on the sub-elements. So candidates understanding can sustain, this is 2.1, a school culture and instructional program conducive to student learning through collaboration, trust, and a personalized learning environment with high expectations for students. So how many concepts or deliverables are within substandard 2.1? Okay, I'm seeing a 3 and a 4. Yeah, here's kind of my rule of thumb. I always eliminate words like understand. What are some of the other words people use? Students will, gosh, I'm not a one. It's usually understand, but students will appreciate. I don't know if they appreciate something or not. Understand, appreciate, words like that, they were kind of, you can't pin them to the wall with data to measure it. I tend to eliminate when I'm working through an unpacking of a standard. So in this case, I would take out understand, and I'd probably even take out the sustain, because at this point, as a professor, I don't know if you're going to sustain it or not, because once you're done with my class, I have no knowledge of what you do. Make sense? So I'm going to focus on that I'm going to do through, I'm going to collaborate, build trust, and help you to create a personalized learning environment. And for me, high expectations is a given in everything that I do, okay? Because I'm going to expect 100% mastery. If I have a student fail my class, I feel like that I failed. I failed the student because I teach to mastery. It's not about how many A's I award or how many D's or C's or F's or whatever. It's about getting you to mastery. So in my ideal world, this is why I'm not a researcher, because this drives people crazy. Everybody would get an A because I want you to learn to master, okay? So let's look at the second one. Candidates understand, and again, I hate that word, and can create and evaluate a comprehensive, rigorous, and coherent curricular and instructional school program. This one's a little complicated. So pay attention to the verbs first, and then what you're going to ask them to do, or the object of the sentence. What if I told you that there were 8 concepts in here? Yeah, I just saw some of you go, what? Okay, so that's why I said look at the verbs first. So the first thing that I want them to do is to create, okay? That's why the verbs matter. What do I want them to create? Comprehensive, rigorous, and evaluate a coherent curriculum. So I'm creating 3 things. So that's 4 concepts. My second verb is evaluate. What am I, so that's 1. What am I evaluating? Well, I'm evaluating, again, comprehensive, rigorous, coherent. Okay? So see how it can be 4 concepts? You could argue for 6 because you're using the same verb for each one of those. So 6, between 6 and 8. But if you don't break it down and understand that you're doing 2 actions under each one of those concepts or objects in the sentence, you're going to miss it, okay? And that's what happens sometimes when we teach. There may be 2 verbs in a sentence, but we don't apply both verbs to all the things or concepts students are supposed to learn. Because there's a big difference between creating and evaluating. They also fall in 2 different spectrums on Bloom's taxonomy. Evaluate is at the high end. That's the good stuff. You know, that's where we want kids thinking and problem solving. Creating falls kind of in the middle. It can move towards the top depending on the scenario, but that's why I said that. Why do I have you go through and think about and identify nouns and verbs? This is why. Okay? Because far too often we will inadvertently miss pieces of a standard when we apply this to instruction. Okay? Look at the last one. Candidates understand and can clearly develop and supervise the instructional and leadership capacity of school staff. So how many do you see here? Yeah, I'm seeing mostly 4s. Yes, that's correct. Because I'm going to develop, instruction and leadership. I'm also going to supervise instruction and leadership. Okay, make sense? And I could argue for 4 to 6 on this one. But if I had stopped just with developing, then I'm forgetting one whole huge element of the standard. Okay, starting to make sense? You guys feeling okay? If not, speak out, please. Okay, I'm not going to go through this one with you guys. But at the collegiate level, we have to do, it's part of our accreditation, we have to do learning outcomes as well as assurances of learning. And quite frankly, I think I wish we would do these universally pre-K through college, but assurances of learning are those things that we do to assure students have learned. So that gets to that evaluation piece that is oftentimes forgotten in instruction. You know, there should be multiple assessment and evaluation points throughout a classroom, or throughout a class period, or throughout teaching. You know, whether you call it a mid-course check or check for understanding, there's a million different names for it, but we have to stop pretty regularly and assess where our students are. Excuse me, I can feel my voice going. Okay, so these are directly from the SLLA. I'm not going to read them to you. But these are some of the assurances of learning and outcomes that we expect students to be able to do. These are all tested on the SLLA. We're fortunate at LSUS, we have one of the highest SLLA passing rates in the state of Louisiana. And so we've done a pretty good job of aligning our curriculum to the assessment and delivering instruction. But it's very similar to what you guys do within the classroom when you're looking at standards, okay? Like, I'm not going to read those to you. So when we think about how do we hit that target or hit that bullseye, we first of all have to understand and unpack standards. Because if we don't, like I said, and you know, it drives me crazy that there are school districts out there that will give you your curriculum and say, we've unpacked the standards for you. Do not believe them. Do not trust them. Because they don't. Or even if they do, that doesn't mean that's what your classroom needs. I'll give you a great example. So in my last high school principalship, my teacher, we've really done a lot to build organizational and relational trust amongst our team members. So I'm in my leadership team meeting, and and they're usually pretty brutally honest with me about everything, which is good. Sometimes I didn't like what they said, but that's okay. It was still good. And my math and my science teachers looked at me and they said, we need to address something with you. I'm like, okay, because I've been really preaching, teach the curriculum, teach the curriculum. And they're like, if we teach the curriculum, our achievement results are going to be awful. And I'm like, what? No, not the vaulted Dallas ISD curriculum. Oh my gosh, what? This curriculum was written to meet the needs of 160,000 students who live in, 50 miles apart from each other. And they're like, yeah. And I said, okay, so what do we do? And I said, first of all, tell me why you feel that way. And they were very articulate. Well, because on the state assessment, this is how the question is answered or is asked. These are things that students need to know. But the curriculum says this. And oftentimes what we found was the curriculum was written at a lower level of Bloom's taxonomy than it was tested. So if I was over here teaching, students will add two-digit numbers, when in reality, it was going to be asked in a word problem with multiple distractors. We weren't going to get it. You see the difference? Very different skill set concept that the students needed. So they said, if you will trust us, we're going to throw out the curriculum and we're going to do what we know needs to be done. We'll follow the standards, because we've done a lot of unpacking. I knew that they knew how to do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust you guys because you're in the classroom. You know what your students need. Even on my best day, I'm not in your classroom every day. I'm not there for extended periods of time. I'm going to trust you. Knowing full well that if we were caught not teaching the curriculum and if our achievement results went down, I was going to be removed as principal. But I had to trust the people closest to the students. Well, we got our achievement results back. They were phenomenal. We beat everybody in the entire district. They went through the roof. So much, they were so high that I'm getting calls from, the director of teaching and learning, the assistant superintendent, what'd y'all do? What'd you do? And so I was brutally honest with them. I said, we found all the holes and problems in the curriculum. And those poor schools that relied on the curriculum got the results your curriculum was designed to get. We looked at the curriculum, used what was good, threw out the bad, and filled in with what we knew worked. So the good news was I got to keep my job, our achievement scores went up, and I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but the next thing I know, every single one of my department chairs in every content area was asked to be on the curriculum writing committee for the district. Because what the district forgot was they had people at central office who had, many of them, good people, don't get me wrong, hadn't been in an actual classroom in 25 years. How do they know what the students need in this day and age? It's vastly different. It's different this year than it was last year, just because of COVID. So alignment really matters. And what my teachers did was they took first the assessment, called backward design. They started with the assessment and they looked at every one, those released questions, not the actual assessment, looked at every question, and then looked at those blueprints. How many times are particular concepts tested? What do the questions look like? Then they went back and looked at the curriculum. And they identified the places where there were gaps or holes. They then unpacked those standards even more, and they designed and created instruction that was meant to fill in those gaps. Kind of makes sense? It's like if you've read Stephen Covey, he talks about begin with the end in mind. So you begin with the assessment. What is it? What is this? And people are like, well, you're just teaching to the test. No, I'm not. Because if the test is designed to assess the curriculum, I've either got a problem, if those two don't match, there's a problem in one of two places. Well, I have no control over the state assessment. I mean, I did have a little because my teachers were so awesome. Several of them got invited to be on the state committee to write the assessments. But I can't really change the assessment, but I sure can mess with that curriculum. And then even most importantly, even if the curriculum's still off, when I go in my classroom and instruct is absolutely essential. Okay, so it kind of makes sense. Sounds really simple in concept. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of time, but it's time well spent. All right, so how do you organize yourself for improvement and sustainability? And again, I apologize for these ridiculously small PowerPoints, but the whole idea is that you can either think from the middle out, or you can also think from the outside in. Generally, we know that our primary role and responsibility is student learning, okay? Then what are those things that I have to do as a teacher to support me, okay? To support me in the classroom, getting my students to learn, okay? So that's gonna require thinking about student learning, planning instruction, curriculum, and assessment. You'll notice that's the next ring. Then I have to plan and think about instruction. Then I have to think about, as a part of this whole cycle, what does that require for professional development, okay? What does that require for evaluation? What does that require for sustainability? So let me give you a concrete example. When I was still a high school principal, and we did instructional rounds. I'm a big, huge fan of Richard Elmore out of Harvard. I got to go study with him one summer. It was like the coolest thing ever. So instructional rounds are based on medical practice rounds. So you know how are they interns? Residents, that's what I'm looking for. Residents will participate in medical rounds. So, you know, if you've ever been to a teaching hospital like LSU, you'll see this group of very young, scared-looking people in white coats walking around with a doctor. And they'll go into a room, and they'll look at all the charts, they'll assess the patient, do all that stuff, and they'll go out of the room, you'll see them congregate in the hall, and they're discussing. Instructional rounds are based on that idea. So you go into a classroom, and you're going to look for a specific thing. So we were going in and looking for vocabulary, because we kept scoring really low in vocabulary. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I look at lesson plans. My teachers teach vocabulary. So we went in, and our instructional round teams were made up. It was anybody that was off that period. Okay, so they were math teachers, science teachers, dance teachers. It didn't matter. They were all in this way. So we go in, and I'm like, okay, we're going to look at vocabulary. That's the only thing we're going to look at. And we basically asked those three questions. Okay, what are you doing? To the students, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And how do you know if you're doing it correctly? What are you learning? Why are you learning? Why are you learning it? How do you know if you've learned it? And we began to notice classroom after classroom after classroom. We were in fact teaching vocabulary, but we weren't teaching it effectively, because what our teachers were doing was they would give the students their vocabulary list for the week. Then on Monday night, their homework was to define the word. On Tuesday night, their homework was to use the word in a sentence. And then they gave a quiz on Friday. The least effective way to teach vocabulary in the world. Does not work. So then we gathered all this data, and we saw the problem pretty quickly. So then I pulled in my leadership team, and I'm like, okay, here's our problem. We're not teaching vocabulary effectively. That's why it's not showing up on our results. What do we do? So they went out and researched, and they came back and they said, we want to use Robert Marzano and Deborah Picking's book, basically, Teaching Academic Vocabulary. Like, okay, I was familiar with the book. It's a great book. And what Marzano and Pickering do is you do a 4-quadrant teaching. So the student does here's the word, they use it in a sentence, they define it, they draw, it's 6 quadrants. They draw a picture, they write their own definition, then they write what question, how they would use this word in real life, okay? So our teachers switched from that. They still gave the quiz on Friday, which is fine, but they used that modality, and guess what? The kids began to score much better on vocabulary, because under Marzano's model, he was hitting the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, all of those different learning styles for our students, and helped us to increase our vocabulary understanding exponentially. So no matter how good a job you do with curriculum, instruction, and assessment, if something's not working, you and preferably other teachers are going into classrooms to observe instruction. It's not about evaluating the teacher. It's to identify what's working and what's not. Okay? So, moving right along, we're not going to do all this stuff. So we talked about, so leadership for learning is really about a dialogue. So we required our teachers they had to have at least one team, department, grade level, whatever, meeting per week. And in that meeting, they were going to be planning instruction. So that meant breaking down the standards, aligning it to the assessment, and then planning instruction. Now we didn't the delivery could be different for teacher to teacher, but those core elements of curriculum and assessment, as well as the instruction that we expected, had to be in alignment. So while Ms. Smith is over here, Ms. Smith and Ms. Jones, both third grade teachers next door to each other, we knew that they were at least teaching the same standard that was unpacked, that those standards were then aligned to the assessment. And they were going to make sure they covered and they taught to mastery those critical elemental concepts. What may have differed was the way they chose to teach it. So for example, Ms. Smith loves collaborative learning. So she puts her kids in collaborative learning groups and they do it. Ms. Jones is not a big fan of collaborative learning. So she uses engaging games and those clicker things where students can like click in a response, almost in a game format. That was her mode of teaching. They were both teaching the same thing and they both got equally good results, but they had freedom on how they wanted to deliver the instruction. Okay? So it also involves the sharing of leadership, as we've talked about. It also keeps and involves a shared sense of accountability. We were we were extremely transparent that when we got back assessment results, we had what we call the war room. It was a shared collaborative space. That's where everybody met for their department meetings, so third grade had, third grade would have the room on, first hour, fourth grade would have it on second hour, etc. And in this room, we posted on all the walls, all the achievement results by teacher. Some people didn't like it at first, but it created a sense of competition, but also a sense of teamwork. Because what began to happen was the teacher with the lowest scores would maybe partner with the teacher who was getting great results. And remember too, we had a pretty similar population across the school. So it's not like I had the GT teacher, the gifted and talented teacher, her scores were separated out from everybody else's. That's not the way it worked. We were pretty homogeneous in terms of the way our classroom, not homogeneous, heterogeneous, in terms of who was in our classrooms, okay? So everybody had their share of gifted kids as well as special needs kids and, everybody in between. But we began to see what was really cool was pretty soon, over time, excuse me, there were no big variations. Everybody was kind of on the same level because teamwork was critical to our success, guys. Too much to teach for one person to figure this all out by themselves. Okay? So, let me stop sharing and take a drink of water so I don't cough in your faces. Okay, so questions, comments, thoughts, pushback. Okay, seriously, you guys are being way too easy. I'm used to people being like, no, that doesn't work. Okay, so do you at least understand in closing? Any questions about unpacking your standards and your assignments about what you have to do? Okay. I promise you, once you do this a few times, it gets so easy. It really does. It's not hard. It's just something different. So, jump right in. If you have questions or comments, just let me know. But I will tell you that even though it's time consuming when you first start doing it, it gets so easy and so fast that I can look at a standard in about 30 seconds. I can unpack it just because I've done it 10 gazillion times. But if you will engage in this, particularly, and if you've got like high achievement scores already, I would look at maybe those areas where you're not quite hitting the mark or not where you want to be, and focus on those areas first. If you're not getting results very well at all at this point, then I would pick those, what we call high stakes standards. Those are the ones that are tested most frequently on the assessment. And we focused on those first because you can't, Rome wasn't built in a day. We couldn't build everything, just in planning period. So we were very conscientious and very strategic about where we started. Kind of makes sense? Yeah, I understand. But yeah, it would have been ideal to know this back in the summer. Yeah, I get it. I do understand that. And we were pretty non-traditional too in our summer development. We had one day that was like everybody together, that we did all that stuff we had to do. We all watched the bloodborne pathogens video and, all that junk. But then all of our other PD days, they were in teams because this is all they did. And like I said, it was really, really powerful. We went from, and when I was an elementary principal, we went from a low achieving school to a recognized school. So in Texas, you had low achieving, acceptable, recognized, exemplary. We went from low achieving to recognized in a single year. At the high school, we made it all the way to exemplary. It took us 2 years. And we were also, by year 3, we were named a National Lutheran School of Excellence, and we were named by the Intel Foundation as the best school in the United States. Then, like I said, it had nothing to do with me as a leader. I empowered my teachers. They were fabulous and amazing. I had the dream team, and they did it. We got there. So, like I said, this stuff does work, and research bears me out. Okay. Yeah, it is somewhat similar to scope and sequence, but it's a little bit deeper dive than a scope and sequence. Scope and sequence is generally, not I haven't seen yours, tend to be pretty global in nature. It's and like I say, it's going to vary from district to district. I've seen some pretty good ones. Plano ISD in Texas has one of the best curriculums I've ever seen. In fact, I tried to talk Dallas into just buying their curriculum from them because it was so dang good. But they had a really unusual model. They had master teachers who taught half the day, and then every afternoon they went to the central office and worked on curriculum every single day. Their curriculum was phenomenal. Very few people do that. Like I said, very few people do that. Okay. All right, guys, well, we are right at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and end. But if you run into questions, comments, problems, anything like that, you know how to reach me. So you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 6.
Have a good night.